fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, welcome into the show. My name's Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Mr. Co-host Keith Myers, been with me all the way, been with each other, 290 some odd episodes into this thing now. It's crazy. Welcome back into the show. Last time we were together, we did a roster evaluation on the offensive side of the ball. This week, we're turning it over on the defensive side of the ball. So far, the team hasn't moved forward yet any further than I think that we were last week as far as the search for a new defensive coordinator. Have you heard anything, Keith?
No, I haven't. I do know that, you said that Ed Donatell's name was brought up, and they did ask for permission. It wasn't just like, someone floated the name. So they did ask for permission to interview him, and I believe that they have, but they want to, not just interview one candidate. They want to ask. And
they interviewed the guy from the Bears too, the DC there.
Yeah, that was Ed Donatell.
No, that was the guy from Denver. It was a younger guy. I can't remember what his name was. I don't have it written down. But anyway, separate guy.
In my head, that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, so they are looking at names outside the organization. The Clint Hurt gonna get promoted thing might still happen, but they do seem interested in bringing in new ideas, new things from outside of Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Someone who's going to bring something new to the program. So
yeah, who was the DC there in Denver? Fangio. So it's all this kind of Fangio coaching tree candidate so far, and that's really all I've heard about, which is interesting to me. The kind of whole Tampa cover 2 type stuff, as opposed to a single high safety that Pete's been running with for a while, at least wanted to run with. Until Earl Thomas left, and hasn't really been able to kind of put it together like he used to like to do. And so
a lot of that comes, you look at the coaching tree, Pete Carroll is actually part of that coaching tree. Now he's a higher up rung than Fangio. But it is that same coaching tree that comes from Monty Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's father, if you really want to, name the people now, but Monty Kiffin was the architect of the Tampa 2 style defense. And, Pete Carroll was a defensive backs coach where Monty Kiffin was the defensive coordinator. And that was where Pete Carroll came up through. He's part of that coaching tree. Fangio's lower on the coaching tree because Pete had been a head coach for a while before Fangio made it up to the defensive coach level. But these are all guys that come from Monty Kiffin. Now, the idea that Pete Carroll in this cover 3 that they run and have run since he got here comes from the Monty Kiffin cover 2 defense is weird. Obviously Pete adapted and changed when he left that coaching tree, but wanting to go back and get into some more of those roots. And, the things that some of the stuff that they do on the front is very similar to what they did in Tampa. But on the back end, it's very different. So I think there's an idea of, okay, let's return more to the roots of this system. And that's why they're looking at other guys, but there are other schemes that he knows will work with his because they're from the same, they have the same DNA, right? So it's a good fit, right? Because it adds new ideas and new things, but those things will work together with what you've already got.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm not terribly surprised that there hasn't been any news. Seattle's been very successful over the last, since this regime got into place back in 2010 of kind of keeping things under wraps until they're ready to kind of have that information fold out publicly. And so I don't anticipate anything different this time. Although, these sorts of things happen rapidly when they do happen. And I would expect news on this front to happen relatively soon, and that being, within a couple of weeks. So we'll find out. But it kind of ties into the conversation that we're having today with regards to the defense. And as we move kind of through the roster on the defensive side of the ball, we'll kind of try to figure out what we're doing scheme wise too, because you kind of want to put these players in the best scheme in the position to be successful. Pete's always, kind of been successful at that, except for the last couple of years. It seems like they've really struggled in trying to match their personnel and scheme, especially at the beginning of the last two seasons.
Yeah. And that's been a major problem. And that is more than anything, the reason why Ken Norton is no longer the defensive coordinator, is because just so unadaptive, so dogmatic in what he wanted to do, regardless of the players that he had on the roster. And then eventually, changes and adaptations were made, but they're mid-season after, being a terrible defense for the first bit. And they can't do that anymore. The
margin for error is too small.
Yeah, you got to come in and you got to at least be competent at the beginning of the year. And we've
seen that the NFC West is the best division in football. And so there's, like I said, there's no margin of error. You've got to win from the beginning of the season. You got to come out strong and be ready to go. And quite frankly, they just didn't have enough to cut it,
Yeah.
Before we get into Seahawks stuff, what did you think about this playoff weekend, this last weekend in the NFL? It was quite a show.
So the first weekend was the weekend of the blowout, and this weekend is the weekend of the last second field goal.
Yeah.
Except for the final game, for the final game, which was in overtime. So we had a last second field goal to send it to overtime instead of win, but every game was decided
by a walk-off play.
Yeah. And so it was absolutely a fun, exciting weekend of football. 3 road teams won. One road team had the lead with 13 seconds left. And it's not like 13 seconds left, but the other team was driving. No, they were kicking off with 13 seconds left and still lost. And
that's tough to do. Now, what did you think of the play? Everyone's talking about the fact that they kicked it through, the end zone there and didn't take any time off the clock. However, Hill had some success running the ball back earlier in the game.
You don't need to kick it to Hill. Just you
squib it somewhere.
Squib it down there towards one of the up backs and let them do it. And if they want to take it and then get it to Hill.
Yeah, I really probably would have done the same thing had I been a coach. I'll just be completely honest. We're talking about 13 seconds. Now, granted, Kansas City had 3 timeouts and Patrick Mahomes, but you don't see very many teams scoring and being able to get the ball in a field goal position in 2 plays and kicking it to get there. It's just one of those things.
I would have squibbed it because that's conventional wisdom, right? You don't the squib kick will give that a little bit of field position, but it uses time and it prevents the big run back because you can't set up a run back. You can't set up a play when you don't know where the ball is going to go and it's bouncing in and you can't get things started. So you don't end up giving up the big run back, but
it's only going to take me roughly 2-3 seconds off the clock, but that's still 2-3 seconds.
It usually takes 4 or 5, but you only got 13. You might as well. And then it shortens it from 2 plays to 1 play. And so it's the difference between a Hail Mary and the ability to get two plays off and try and get in field goal range. So I would have squibbed it. In the end, I don't think that matters. What matters more is the play after. There's the 2 plays after that where they gave up 2 big plays to get them in. And the Bills defense was gassed, but that was also not the only problem. I mean, you also have there's only single outside coverage on Kelsey and the whole middle of the field wide open for him. It was just a quick little slant and 25 yards and they get in range. I mean, you got to take that away from him.
Yeah, I thought Josh Allen, definitely played his butt off in this game. But if you really take a look at it in the advanced stats in this thing, it was closer than it was not as close as the score was kind of made out to be, because the Bills had to convert 4 fourth down conversions, some of those longer than 10 yards, just to even be in the game.
Yeah.
And the Chiefs, well, you can put that on the Chiefs or whatever. But nonetheless, I think in the end, the Chiefs probably were the team that deserved to win based on the overall play, but you can't take anything away from Josh Allen and the way that he played. That game was epic, as far as the back and forth and stuff in the final few minutes. Fun game, but
25 points in the last minute 50.
Yeah, that's nuts. It's fun. I mean, that's when football is just really fun. You have no idea what the heck's going to happen next. I really like the Bengals over the Titans. There's just something about Burrow that's special, and I think he's going to be a special player for a long time in this league. The 49ers over the Packers, that was kind of interesting to me. It ended up being more of a defensive game.
That game was terrible. That game was hard to watch.
Yeah.
It was so bad. You can't have watched that game and felt the 49ers were the better team. I mean, they could not do anything.
They weren't the worst team, though.
They were for everything.
Because the Packers only ran the ball for like 60, 65 yards. Rodgers didn't do anything special. He didn't throw any touchdowns, didn't throw any interceptions either. But they just didn't do enough to win a game at home against an inferior opponent. That's the part. There at no point in this entire season, from week 1 and through all the way till right this second, have the 49ers looked like a good football team out there. They've done a little here, they've done a little there, they've got a couple lucky breaks, they've made a couple plays. I mean, the 49ers won that game with Garoppolo completing 11 and 19 for 131 yards and an interception, and only ran the ball 106 yards total offense.
Yeah.
And they won.
They did nothing offensively. The defense played pretty well. They did nothing offensively. They scored 3 points. That's it. Total. They won that game because of a blocked punt return for a touchdown and a blocked field goal.
Yeah. I know.
That's it. That's it.
But like I said, the Packers didn't do enough to win that game. The Packers needed to go win that game, and they didn't do enough.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree.
I'm not going to give it to the 49ers. I mean, obviously, but anyway, what do you think of the Rams Bucks game and kind of the ramifications of that?
Well, the right team won that game. The Rams freaking blew them out and then decided to be stupid and fumble the ball over and over and over again. I think they had 4 fumbles to give
Akers had a couple of them critical situations.
He had one at the goal line and then one at the end when he was gonna get the first down and then fumbled the ball. And if he gets that first down, they only have to get one more first down and the game's over. Cooper Kupp had one, right? How often does that guy make a mistake? It just overall it was bad. Like I said, I think they lost 4 fumbles total in that game. And they look clearly better, especially in the first half. Yeah, that gave the Bucs a chance to get back into it. But really what it was the Rams made all the mistakes in the second half. It never felt, other than that one 3-play 77-yard drive where Brady hit Evans on that beautiful ball down the right sideline. Other than that, the Bucs didn't make a lot of plays in this game on either side of the ball.
No, not really.
The Rams dominated the game when they held on to the football, and they let the Bucs back in it when they, started fumbling it. But it's not like Brady wasn't good in that game. So the whole people talking about him retiring, I could see it. He didn't play well.
So a fun weekend overall. What do you think of the matchups in the AFC and NFC championship games?
I mean, they're great. I mean,
do you think the Bengals have a shot?
Yeah, I do.
I do too.
Because they're a good solid team. And I've been saying this all year. I think the Bengals are a year away. I think their roster is set up for next year to be the year where they are ready.
I mean, they did hold the Titans to 16 points. And if they can keep the Chiefs under 25, they might have a shot. But the Bengals, even though they put up yardage, they don't seem to score a lot of points, which would be concerning to me. But the Titans have a pretty decent defense too. It'll be interesting to see because the Chiefs will allow you to score. But that'll be a fun game. That'll be a super fun game. Really. Yeah.
And then the Rams 49ers game shouldn't be fun. It should be a one-sided blowout because you've got one team which has clearly got more talent than the other.
But the 49ers have won the last 6 games.
But you have a coaching matchup that just favors the 49ers. I don't know what it is, but Shanahan has McVay's number. Look at what happened in the final game of the season. Like the Rams jumped out 17-0 early, and then 49ers actually came back and won. It's just something about that. Shanahan just has the ability to know what Sean McVay is going to do and counter it before it happens. And it's just uncanny. And so who knows what's going to happen in that game?
I think the difference is, though, that Matthew Stafford, I think that's going to be the difference this time and possibly puts them over the top in this game. Garoppolo is just not that guy. It's hard for me to see a Garoppolo quarterback winning an NFC Championship game. It's just, I have a hard time, but he's been there before. They've done it. They figure out ways. It's crazy.
Yeah, they won with him throwing for 138 yards and an interception, no touchdowns.
I know. All right, so let's talk Seahawks football.
Okay. We do that around here, I think.
Yeah, enough about those guys. So let's just start in the trenches here with this team. When you go through the roster and you look at who's under contract, there's some future deals. So I'm not really going to play that much attention to those deals right now. Even if I did, there's a number of players on there that aren't even relevant to the conversation about depth and rotation and all that kind of stuff. So really what we've got at defensive tackle is Poona Ford and a whole lot of nothing. Yeah. So, I mean, Brian Monet is kind of an exclusive rights guy. They probably have him back. When you take a look, though, at advanced stats, I know Brian Monet, a lot of people feel he does a great job and stuff, but he's just really another rotation piece.
He is.
I think a kind of a replacement level person in there, whether it's him or somebody else. That position group is one of the weaker position groups on the team and is going to need some serious attention this offseason.
It is. And I think that they're set up to make some moves there because you're right. They've got Poona Ford, who is a, borderline Pro Bowl player. And, Brian Monet as an exclusive rights guy, he'll be back on a minimum deal. Like, 480,000 ends up being what a lot of those guys make. And so, he'll make practically nothing. So he'll be back. But there's no depth. And Monet's not a starter. He's a guy that should be your third or fourth tackle that rotates in, plays in your goal line, your short yardage situations. And that's about it, right? That's kind of his ideal role. You need that other guy. Now they used to have John Reed. He's gone. They brought in Al Woods. Al Woods played, amazingly well this year, considering his age and the fact that he's just a journeyman. But he's an unrestricted free agent. Robert Kimdiche, a former first-round pick of Arizona, was brought in. He was, active and then inactive and then active again and never really did much. He's an unrestricted free agent, probably gone. And then you got futures guys. I mean, the middle of that defense it's Poona and nothing.
Yeah, right. The cupboards are bare, and the Seahawks, if you take a look at the salary cap too, right now over the cap is projecting us at 42. Last week we were talking, it was 52. Obviously some adjustments were made in the week. And so it's at 42. When you take a look at the real number, it's probably closer to 32. But there are some moves that the Seahawks can make in order to adjust that. Bobby Wagner's got a big number. There could be a restructure there, or a trade, or a cut. Russell Wilson could obviously have his contract restructured somehow or another to help out. A few other moves. But, realistically, we do have some opportunity to address the holes that we have. But this one seems to just be a real big one. The other one would be cornerback, where we've got Trey Brown and then a whole lot of nothing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to make some decisions whether we want to spend the money to retain players like DJ Reed and Sidney Jones, at least one of them, to come back. So what are your thoughts on the cornerback position as being the other kind of weak link on the defense right now?
Well, it was the massive weak link all season. And now you've got your two starters, your two guys that actually played well as unrestricted free agents. And so you're going to have to pay them to come back. And DJ Reed was pretty good. Sidney Jones played better down the stretch, but ultimately, this was the weakest part of the defense. And now the weakest part of the defense is going to cost more just to be the same. And that's not a good place to be. And you got Trey Brown, but Trey Brown's coming back from a fairly devastating patella tendon injury. So they're hurting. They need a starter at cornerback.
Yes.
Because I don't think you can trust Trey Brown early in the season. Just you got to give him an opportunity.
Do you think if you signed DJ Reed and Sidney Jones that would be enough of a move for this team? Plus, maybe a rookie, maybe a couple other low level rotation guys to come in. Do you think that's enough to address that position?
No, because they needed an upgrade. They need to take one of those two guys, DJ Reed and Sidney Jones, and turn them into a better player. So that way they actually upgrade that cornerback position, because that was a weakness. Now, I will say that if there's a scheme change, and let's say they go to a cover 2 instead of a cover 3, well, now you need a different kind of corner, and you're not going to rely on your corners as much, because they're going to be up, jam the receiver, and then you cover the flat. They don't get back deep. They don't have to run with people. And if that's the case, well, then this is a completely different conversation, because
the conversation needs
with different corners.
The conversation then needs to turn into free safety, and that becomes a more important position. So let's talk about safeties. As part of that, right now we've got Jamal Adams, had the surgery. We anticipate he would come back full strength at camp, but we've seen him get injured now 2 years in a row, miss parts of seasons. Then Marquis Blair, another player that has had injury concerns and been out extensive time, that hasn't really made an impact on the defense yet. Ugo Amadi, is another just kind of a less than Pro Bowl level guy, but adequate for you in certain spots. Ryan Neal's a restricted free agent. Quandre Diggs is unrestricted. Team needs to decide whether they're going to re-sign him or not, and how much it's going to cost. In addition to Quandre Diggs, there's really no other free safety option on the team, and if the team's going to run some of that back end cover 2 stuff, they need to address that.
Well, if you're going to run a cover 3, your free safety is an extremely important part of your defense, because you got to cover the middle of the field, but also you end up rotating and helping the cornerbacks as well. When you play the cover
in 2, in a single high type situation.
Yeah. And so in a cover 2, if they go that way, well, now you've got 2 safeties back there, and you split the field in half. They don't need to have as much range, and that kind of stuff. So you look at that and you go, okay, what are you going to do there? Ugo Amadi has the speed. He doesn't have a great size, but he's got good coverage ability. We know, because he's a nickel corner when he's not playing free safety. Maybe Ryan Neal can also be that guy.
Marquis Blair could be that guy.
Marquis Blair could be that if he can stay healthy. So if you're going to go to that cover 2 system, again, you might have with Blair and Amadi, you might have the guys that you're looking for, and Ryan Neal in there too. But if you're going to go single high and you're going to go back to the cover 3 and do what the Seahawks have been doing, none of those guys are that guy. I mean, Quandre Diggs was borderline, and he was really good.
Yes, right.
You need a guy with some serious wheels that can cover a lot of ground, and that's what Earl Thomas was, and why he was so great. But you got to find a player that can do those things, and there's not one on the roster right now.
Whew. So right there, we've mentioned 3 position groups already, and I'm deeply concerned. I mean, we only have so much money, and we've got big holes on the other side. We've got extensions to think about. We're re-signing Quandre Diggs, who got more expensive as the play improved, in the second half of the season. And it just we're depending on just a small group of players to really step up, and I just lack the confidence that that's going to happen. So,
well, let's look at defensive end, because some of the answer is going to lie there, because you've got Benson Mayowa,
which is the position group that Pete said we have to address in the offseason.
Yeah. So Benson Mayowa, who is infinitely cuttable, LJ Collier, who didn't do much this year after having a better year the year before.
He did have one of the highest percentage quarterback pass rush win rates on the team, though, at 14 point something percent.
Yeah, but
which is middling
so
anyway.
Yeah. Alton Robinson, Darrell Taylor both looked good. Kerry Hyder was a disappointment. Carlos Dunlap spent the first half of the year completely invisible, and then came on later in the year. And that's what's on your roster. Rasheem Green, who was one of the guys who played better. He's an unrestricted free agent.
So this is one of the groups I think that was impacted the most by the ineptitude of Ken Norton Jr. the most, as far as player usage, scheme. In scheme, what I'm talking about mostly is guys out of this position group dropping back into coverage quite frequently, sometimes up to 30% of their snaps was coverage snaps. And I'm talking about guys like Benson Mayowa and
Darrell Taylor.
Yeah.
And Alton Robinson.
Right. And so, I'm hoping for a little bit of a change, and just the change in scheme matching up with personnel correctly may improve this group as it is. But we've got Benson Mayowa, Collier, Robinson, Dunlap, Hyder, and Taylor are all under contract. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll all be back on the team. Team can move on. They can cut. There's some cap savings to be had. Small cap savings with each one of these players, but nonetheless, it is there if they decide to move on. And then Marcus Webb is a player that's a restricted guy. Rasheem Green is the unrestricted guy we hadn't mentioned yet. He is, back if the team wants him back and wants to pay him. Otherwise, he's going to be out there looking to get a payday. And that seemingly seems more likely than not, just based on the sheer number of holes that we have on this team. I don't know if they're going to be able to afford him.
He was the best 5-tech on the roster.
Yes.
Sorry, Kerry Hyder Jr. You were outplayed by Rasheem Green this year. And LJ Collier, sorry, you were outplayed by everyone on the roster this year. But Rasheem Green was the best one. And so what do you do with that? I mean, do you, if you watch?
Well, and you've got Pete Carroll out there saying that this is the group that needs to be improved the most. So is he one of those guys that's your core guy that you're going to bring back and build around? Or is he a guy you're going to let go, and you might let go 2 or 3 of these other guys that are under contract and just try to rebuild this entire thing from scratch? I don't know.
Well, that's why you were saying, oh, we don't, we've got all these holes and we don't have a lot of money. Well, I look at this and I go, this position, you've got Robinson and Taylor and Dunlap, who the 3 of them make your 2 starters and your primary rotation piece. And everyone else is expendable. Bring in a rookie or 2 to kind of round out and give you some depth. But those 3 guys give you the rotation that you need at defensive end, and the rest of it just didn't contribute this last year. And
I even bring back Kerry Hyder and hope that a scheme change can help Kerry Hyder be more effective as well.
Yeah.
And he is under contract.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you bring those 4 guys back. Taylor, Hyder, Robinson, and
okay. But let's combine that with the defensive tackle group, and tell me what they need to do to make that group whole. Like, what would be your off-season plan in general?
My off-season plan would be to get a nose tackle and move Poona Ford to the 3 technique, because
that's interesting.
His pass rush win rate was really good for a defensive tackle. I think he was number 10 overall in the entire NFL. And this is with him playing nose tackle and most of the time being asked to just eat blocks and eat that double team.
You would rather take a chance on Poona Ford over at a 3 tech full time and bring in a nose tackle rather than switch that around.
Yeah. Because a nose tackle is going to cost you half as much.
Yeah, and Poona's already paid for, essentially. I mean, he's under contract, and
he's already paid for, and you've seen him do it. I mean, his ability to get upfield and rush the passer. He's, like you said, he's the 10th best in the entire NFL.
I'll be completely honest. I was hoping that the team would throw a little bit more money at that particular situation, just because I think it's really critical that we have some sort of game wrecker on the roster. I'm just not sure that Poona Ford is that guy. I don't know if he's that guy that's able to draw double teams and still get the job done in the interior push there in order to take some of the pressure off of guys like Dunlap and Hyder and Taylor and so forth. I'm just not sold. I get though what you're saying. That would be a decision that's going to need to be made by the new regime. And I get it. I really do. Because I think Poona Ford probably is a better 3 tech than he is working on the inside, just as a run stuffer kind of a guy. Especially if you could get a guy like Al Woods back. To me, it seems like the team already had that option. They had Al Woods, and you know how big Al Woods is, and he's a kind of a space eater. They didn't run that though. They didn't use Al Woods in that way along with Poona Ford. They kind of played them in tandem there, kind of doing the same job.
Yeah, they both were interior space eaters, and that's what they asked them to do. And yet Poona Ford still had a pass rush win rate that would put him in the top 10 in the NFL. Even though what they were asking him to do is to be a nose tackle and eat blocks and keep other people clean. That's why I think if you put him at 3 tech and you tell him to just go eat, that he will. But you've got to put a body next to him that can do the job there and keep him clean. Keep him as the guy that isn't getting double teamed because your nose tackle is eating that center block and forcing the guard to block Poona by themselves. And that's what this team needs, I think. Now, you can leave Poona at the nose tackle and let him do that job, and you can bring in a game wrecker at the 3 tech, but it's going to cost you a lot more than getting that nose tackle. And
I think you find a guy like that in the draft.
I think you can get a guy to be the nose tackle next to Poona cheaper and later in the draft than you.
Let's talk about Brian Monet. What do you think about Brian Monet as the space eater? I mean, he's been there doing it, but I'm just not. He's a giant man who eats space whether he wants to or not. But at the same time, he doesn't have that strength, that power. He's just huge and hard to move. And I honestly, you said it earlier. You called him a replacement level player, and I think that's fitting. He is a guy that's part of a rotation, and he can make some plays, and he can, play some snaps and give guys a break, but he's never going to be a guy that is a major contributor to a great defense. Okay. So we haven't talked about a couple things yet. Let's talk about the linebacker situation.
Yeah.
Under contract currently, Bobby Wagner. He's got a big number. Let's talk about that. $20 million cap hit. He's got, he's the second highest paid player on the team by a long shot. And he would have a $16,600,000 savings if we were to move on from Bobby Wagner, or we restructure and extend, which seems more likely, to give us a little bit more spending money and to help round out the roster. And then we've got Jordan Brooks, obviously, Cody Barton, Nick Balor, Ben Berkervin, and then a whole bunch of guys on future contracts. That seems to be the roster position group that's best in the best shape, but there's still that question mark about Bobby Wagner.
Well, Nick Balor and Ben Berkervin are special teams players listed at linebacker, but can't play linebacker. I mean, they would bring in Ben Berkervin in an emergency to play outside linebacker, and Nick, but right. If you're playing those guys, anything significant on defense, you're gonna get crushed. But the other three guys, I mean, Bobby Wagner is one of the best that's ever done it. Jordan Brooks looks absolutely fantastic. And Nick Balor, who's been kind of a disappointment.
Cody Barton.
Cody Barton, who's been kind of a disappointment because you think a 3rd round pick, you keep waiting for him to get a chance to get in and do more than just play on special teams. But then he finally did the last 2 weeks when he was replacing Bobby Wagner, and that did look good. Like he's not Bobby Wagner, but nobody is. But it wasn't nearly this massive drop off that we were expecting. So, so
how does the team approach this position group in the offseason? It really seems to me like it's, if you decide that Cody Barton's a contributor, and you're going to put Darrell Taylor as a strong side guy, or you're going to put Kerry Hyder or even a guy like Benson Mayowa out there and just kind of have this big rotation. It seems like maybe the linebacker spot is okay for this year if they, rework Bobby Wagner and so forth.
Yep. If they rework Bobby Wagner's contract and they go ahead and extend him a year or two, keep him under contract, but get his cap number down under control, I think you're kind of done at linebacker, because you've got your 2 main starters and you've got a 3rd guy that can rotate through. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do at the strong side, whether you're going to use the Benson Mayowa group or whether you're going to bring in a guy who actually is a linebacker.
And they do have a couple guys on the futures contract guys that they really like. Radican hurt his knee. He had like an ACL, and he's going to have to figure that out. But even Aaron Donker is good. Tanner Muse is a guy that they brought in that has some potential as well. So,
so those last 2 positions, defensive end and linebacker, there's a lot of names already under contract, so they don't need to go add a bunch of players, and there's opportunities to increase your cap spending ability, so you can go get that defensive tackle or cornerback that you need. So really, those 2 position groups kind of dictate what you're going to do this offseason.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, this conversation was, we spent some time talking about the NFL in general, but this conversation was kind of short and sweet because really, those 2 position groups are okay. We're going to have to address those things. But it's the defensive tackle and cornerback group, to me, it's almost like it's empty and we just need to start over.
It really comes down to what you're going to do with the defense, because if they bring in a new coordinator they're going to switch and run more of the cover 2, then what you need at corner and safety is different than what you need if you're going to run the cover 3 that they've been running. And I think that that's the kind of thing that you have to answer, because if they switch to the cover 2, they may be okay at safety. If they go with cover 3, they need a free safety badly. If that's Quandre Diggs, fine. But
Quandre Diggs may or may not come back. So I still, even if Quandre Diggs comes back, I still think that they'd go out and get a free safety, whether it's in the draft or, a mid-tier guy in that's got some experience maybe in that defense, whichever defense we bring in. Would make a lot of sense to me, because that would be a critical area, and I don't want to get left behind like we have been the last couple of years. We just seem to have talent deficits on key positions, and the corner group the last couple of years, even when we had Griffin, was still marginal, with Trey Flowers back there and whatnot. So I'd love to be able to invest a little bit of money in the corner and safety group this offseason.
See, I don't want to spend any capital or money on safety unless
I know you don't, but a free safety is really important in this defense.
True, but as a team, where do you want to spend your money? Where does your priorities? How do you?
Well, I'd take it out of Bobby Wagner's pocket and I'd put it in those position groups, to be completely honest with you.
See, I don't want, you've already got so many resources.
Jamal Adams is the 5th highest paid defensive back in general. I'm not even talking safety, just defensive backs in general, right? But Bobby Wagner's also paid out at the wazoo for a linebacker. So if we could restructure Bobby, get that cap in line with where you need to be, and turn that money over to your defensive tackle group, I agree with that. You said that earlier, but also the defensive backs, I think, still could use some help.
I think that if you're building a roster, where do you want to spend your money and your resources? You want to spend them on the defensive line and at cornerback. You want to be able to cover the receivers so you can get to the quarterback, and you need a talent to get to the quarterback. And instead, the Seahawks have this tendency to spend on linebacker and safety. And I think that has burned them over the last few years. So I don't want to spend a lot of money at safety. Now, if that's what it takes to bring Quandre Diggs back, fine. But I want to spend that money at corner. If they free up a bunch of money with Bobby Wagner's contract and extending him and get themselves $10 million to spend extra, I'll go get yourself a top corner. Don't spend a dime on another safety, because safety is not an impact position the way that cornerback can be.
Agreed. All right. So this sets us up for the rest of the year. So we've talked about the roster. Now we can start talking about free agency, our own free agents, what's out there, what's available, what might help us, good scheme fits, all that kind of stuff. We'll have a conversation about coaches, I'm sure, in the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully
with
soon.
With regards to scheme, how it all fits. It's like building a puzzle. And then we'll be evaluating prospects, players out of the NFL draft, and those shows will start soon for the Seahawks. So good, awesome. Thank you, Keith. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
So find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all everything. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube, and make sure you subscribe. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.